Welcome to Germany study part 2. This is not involving the Mosel or the Rheingau. So all of the other Anbaugebiete will be touched upon in this presentation. It's fairly quick, but I'm proud of the work that's gone into it, and I think it's fairly concise and to the point. So let's get started. Before we look at the different Anbaugebiete of Germany, I wanted to give you a few German translations just to sort of understand what these words mean as we move forward, because I don't speak German. I'm going to mispronounce basically everything in this presentation, but here is a quick little guide to what you're going to see time and time again for the different Einslagen or Gemeinden, what they're named after. Berg means mountain. Berg with a U means castle. Schloss is a castle or a palace. Bad, which we'll see when we get to the Nahe quite a few times, is a bath or a spa town. Stein means stone. Heim means home. Haus is home. Hausen is the verb tense of to live. Morgen is morning. Bush is bush. Strasse, we'll see this one a few times too, means road. Dorf is village. Stadt is city. Hola is cave. Grube is pit. Bach is a brook or a stream. Stuhl is a chair. Kammer is a chamber, and Kron is a crown. So we'll see those. We'll come across a few of them, and we'll point them out. Before we get any deeper, though, we need to take a look at a few crossings. I put synonyms. I didn't put any of those in here. Müller-Thurgau is a crossing of Riesling and Madeleine Royale. Dornfelder of Helfensteiner and Harold Rebbe, and Scheu Rebbe of Riesling and Buchetrebe. The reason these are important is that we saw sort of a shift towards more winter hardy varieties in Germany mid-century in the 20th century. And so there was a lot of crossings that were created for things that weren't necessarily for quality winemaking, but for the ability to just simply grow in a marginal area. Here's the wine folly map. I always like looking at these two. Today we're going to look at the R, one of the northernmost areas for really quality Spätburgunder production. We'll look at the Sally Unstrut and Sachsen up here too, Franken, the Baden, the Württemberg, the Pfalz Nahe, and the Rhine-Hessen. I wanted to throw this out here. I've thrown it into a couple of different presentations, regional comparisons of the largest viticultural area down to the smallest. And it's a little bit different for Germany because these actually, Einslage is a vineyard, essentially. But you can see it in comparison to, say, South Africa with geographical unit, region, district, and ward. Germany works from Anbaugebiet, the largest geographical area, to Bereich, to Gemeinde, and then down to the vineyard level with Einslage. And I should probably put Burgundy in here too. It would be a good way to look at it. The first one we're going to look at, though, is the Rhine-Hessen. And I love these little flow charts for helping me visualize how a region gets kaleidoscopically more focused in. You can see in the Rhine-Hessen there are 3 Bereich, the Bingen, the Nierstein, and the Vonnegut, and then a handful of Gemeinden that I think are important within them, and then the Einslagen that are also, I think, rather important. Also important to note, an unofficial area known as the Roderhang that sits in the Nierstein Bereich, between Nierstein and Nackenheim, and covers the vineyards of Pettenthal and Rothenburg. There's a handful of other vineyard sites here that are quite important. And here we can take a look even closer in the Rhine-Hessen, right off of the Rhine. You could see the 3 Bereich here, the Bingen to the west, the Nierstein to the east, and then the Vonnegut in the south, home to Worms. But here is that little small area between Nackenheim and Nierstein that we can say is the Roderhang in general. I think it spreads even a little further down to Oppenheim. As you can tell, with a Bereich of, an Anbaugebiet of this size, it's less influenced from the river that it's named after in the Rhine. Here you'll find limestone plateaus and very low valleys. It's not nearly as sloped as we'll see in, say, the Mosel. It accounts for about 25% of overall German vineyard acreage. It first became famous really for Liebfraumilch, which is that famous blend that is translated to Our Lady's milk. And Ron Burgundy is here to remind us that milk was a bad choice with Liebfraumilch, as well as Blue Nun. It should be noted that Liebfraumilch has the 18 grams per liter requirement of residual sugar, and then the minimum blending of 70% Riesling, Müller-Thurgau, Sylvaner, and Kerner, that you cannot label it varietally. We mentioned the Roter Hang, which translates to the Red Hill, quality focused. It's home to producers like Wittmann and Keller. Your G-Max, which is the most expensive Riesling in the world, comes from a hidden parcel here between Nackenheim and Nierstein. And then we also mentioned Pettenthal and Rothenburg within it. Primarily a white wine focused on Bagabiet and Riesling leads, although there are large plantings of Sylvaner and Müller-Thurgau. Here you'll also find the message in a bottle producers, which include Keller, Wittmann, Wagner Stempel, and Kuhling Gielot. I'm sure I just butchered that one. Gunderloch is here as well. They own about 3/4 of that Rothenburg vineyard. And then your Grosse Lager grapes that are permitted are Riesling and Spätburgunder. Next, we'll take a look at the faults. There are actually 2 Bereiche here, but there are so many Einzlager that I put them on 2 different slides you'll see here. But I think the most important come from Mittelhart Deutsche Weinstrasse. So your 2 Bereiche here are named Weinstrasse. The first one is Northern, and it's the Mittelhart Deutsche, and the other one is Südliche Weinstrasse. Weinstrasse translate, we mentioned earlier, Strasse is a road. So this is the wine road. And the one of the northern portion here is the Mittelhart Deutsche wine road. Important Gemeinden here, Forst certainly stands out. And it should be noted that within it, you'll find Kirchenstück, Pechstein, Jesuits and Garden. You also have Rupertsberg with the Geisball, where you have, a monopole of Dr. Birkeland Wolf. Diedesheim is important. When you get to the Südliche Weinstrasse, you have fewer quality Einzlager, I would say. Remember that this is just a guide to the most important ones. There are several other Gemeinden and Einzlager in each of these. So let's take a look real quick. In addition to that cool map on the left, the Gildsam map, I think helps to really showcase what's going on in the faults. Of course, we know this is basically an extension of Alsace. And you can see here in the north, the Mittelhart Deutsche Weinstrasse, and then here in the south is the Südliche Weinstrasse. And really a collection of the best vineyard sites right through here in Diedesheim and Forst and Rupertsberg. And then you can compare it over here, where it sits right off the Rhine River. It's the second largest plantings of any on Bagabiet in all of Germany, and it has the most Riesling. You have varied soils, of course, as an extension of Alsace. We know there's a ton of different soil types there. It continues here in the faults. It's warmer and sunnier than what you would find in the Mosel. And of course, with it being an extension of Alsace, you have the Hart Hills, which are an extension of the Vosges Mountains. They're capped by the Platinate Forest, which is east-facing, right? So east-facing blocks the vineyards from those hot afternoon sun temperatures. We mentioned the 2 Bereich, great producers here, Riedstraat, Von Buell, Birkeland Wolf, and Bassermann Jordan, plus you also have Müller-Courtois, and then Von Winning, which people are really in love with these days, famous for utilizing New Barrique. And then Rebholz actually from the Südliche Weinstrasse. Your Grosse Lager grapes permitted here are Riesling, Weissburgunder, and Spätburgunder. Next, we'll take a look at the Franken as we move further east. There are 3 Bereich here, Mainvereck, Maingereck, and Steigerwald. Wald, I should say, too, means forest. I didn't put that one in there, but I should probably put that in there. And then you could tell what river comes through the Franken because it's the main river, and its name is on 2 of the Bereich here. As you get further in, you'll find important Gemeinde, and I think probably the most important Einzlager here is Stein. It's the most continental climate in all of Germany. You can see it. It's a slightly different map because it's further, I guess, inland, further east. Very winter-hardy crossings are dotting all of the landscape. Müller-Thurgau is 26%. Sylvaner perhaps is the best suited. Here you'll find the famous Sylvaner bottles in the box butel that are shaped after, some people will say, goat's balls. It lies, again, along that main river. And the hybrids are really common because of the marginal climate. We mentioned the 3 Bereiche here, the Grosse Lager grapes that are permitted for the Franken. are Riesling, Sylvaner, Weissburgunder, and Spätburgunder. So it's interesting to note, as you start to see more grape varieties permitted for Großlager sites, you get away from the high quality focused Riesling areas. The Nahe has a singular Bereich, and is the Nahe Tal. It has a handful of Gemeinde that are important, and within those, some really great Einslagen, including the Allenba sites of Donhof, the Oberhauser Breuke, and then the Niederhausen, Hermannshöhle, and Hermannsberg are rather famous as well. And I mentioned Bad being a spa town or a bath. So you'll find two little villages that are known for spas, in Bad Kreuznach and Bad Munster. Another white dominant region surrounding the Nahe and its tributaries, and you can see that through here. Warmer and drier than any other Anbaugebiet, falls between, really between maritime and continental climates. Of course, home to Weingut Donhof. The Nahe Tal, though, can be broken into upper, middle, and lower, which is important to note. The Hunsrück-Hochwald forest, as the western border separates it from the Mosel. It's home to several smaller streams that break off of the Nahe River, including the Grafenbach, the Trollbach in the north, and then in the south you'll find the Glan and the Alsons. We mentioned Donhof. Also, you'll find here Schlossgut-Diel and Schäfer-Fröhlich. The Baden has a ton of different Bereiche. It's out closer to Franken, further east. It's a large area split into a couple of different, it's almost north and south. Perhaps the most important Bereich, though, is the Kaiserstuhl. And you'll see it's got a handful of villages that are important, or Gemeinden. Perhaps Freiburg is the most important. And then within those, you'll see a handful of Einslagen. Although in the Ordenau, you'll find Neuweyers, Mauerberg, with two subzones, Mauerwein and Frankel. You'll also see Lake Constance, or Bodensee, and I'll point that out on the map right here, way down in the south. So you can see Baden is here. Franken, you know, we're getting further away from the Rhine River, right? It's not quite as driven by river influence. And then you see the Neckar that cuts through Württemberg. But down here is Lake Constance, or the Bodensee. And you've got just a little smidge of Württemberg and Baden vineyard sites down here. This is the third largest Anbaugebiet. It's parallel to Alsace and the Pfalz here. And it sits between the Rhine River and the Black Forest, or the Schwarzwald. It's great for Burgundian varieties. Here you'll see Weissburgunder and Grauburgunder, but most important, Spätburgunder. Spätburgunder dates to 884 in the region, and that is not a typo. It's found the most success in Ordenau, Breisgau, Kaiserstuhl, and Tuneberg, but really Kaiserstuhl is the focus for it. It's known for ample sunlight and volcanic soils and plenty of ripeness for Pinot Noir. We mentioned the southern portion here abuts Switzerland with Lake Constance and Bodensee. You'll find about 1,000 acres of Chasselas down here. Co-ops play a very large role in this Anbaugebiet. And as we mentioned, as you get away from those Riesling-focused areas, you'll find a lot more Großlager grapes permitted. And this one you'll see more Burgundian, including Riesling though. And then there's also a local specialty known as Ruhlander, which is the synonym that they use for sweeter styles of Grauburgunder. The Württemberg, handful of Bereiche, but again, less focused on the important quality small vineyard sites that you'll see as some of the others have. This is the fourth largest Anbaugebiet in terms of vineyards. It's 70% red, right? So we're getting away from the rivers, we're getting away from the northerly portions. You're seeing more red wines come into play. Trollinger is the most planted, but Lemberger is probably the most standout, or Blaufränkisch. Schwarz Riesling, which is Meunier, also is very important. You'll find a blended rosé, which next to Champagne is one of the only regions that can blend. And here it's not just allowed to blend, it's required to blend. There's also a small smattering. We mentioned of vineyards right here on Lake Constance, the Neckar River, and then your Großlager grapes permitted here. Again, a lot more, right? But including Lemberger, which is important to note. The R way in the north, this sits on the 51st parallel, has a singular Bereich, the Walporsum Artal, but it's got a handful of villages that are important. And I point out here that Meyer-Nakel is within the Durnau, and we'll talk about why that's so important. Let's look at it first before we go anywhere. Here's the Ahr River, breaks off from the Rhine. You can see here just across from the Mittelrhein. It's really, really far north. But it's one of the country's foremost producers of Spätburgunder and Frühburgunder, which is the early ripening mutation of Spät. It covers 70% of the plantings compared to only 8% for Riesling. These are slate-grown Pinot Noirs that provides a smoky undertone. The river here is too small to have a mitigating effect, though you do see some pretty steeply sloped vineyard sites between 60 and 70 degrees. We mentioned Meier-Nakel. Other great producers of the region are Stadden and Adenauer. The upper Ahr is pure slate with no phylloxera, and some of the vineyards are over a century old and they're still on single posts. But it was Meier-Nakel's arrival to Durnau, which I should point out is basically dead center, just a little west of dead center in the Ahr, in the 1980s that shifted the region to Pinot Noir and shifted it to dryness with Guillot trellising with longer macerations and oak barrel usage. The Gulf Stream and the east-west orientation lengthened the growing season here despite being north of that 50th parallel. And here you'll find the vine rows are oriented north-south. So they're maximizing sunlight and rain shadow. They're getting both morning sunlight and afternoon sunlight. And the rain shadow here is provided by the Eifel Mountains. I mentioned that twice in that sentence for some reason. The Mittelrhein, a couple of Bereich, the most important Loreley, and within it, perhaps the most important Bacharach Gemeinde, and the Hahn Einzlage. Not a ton of vineyards though anymore. It was made a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2003. It's a beautiful area to go apparently. Great river and then beautiful castles right at the top. But viticulture gave way to cherry growing after phylloxera at the end of the 19th century. Negotiants really drove farmers to favor quantity over quality, and the steep slopes make viticulture quite costly. So there's less than 500 hectares of vines today. Although Koblenz, where the Rhine and Mosel converge, is here, as is the confluence of the Ahr and the Rhine. Siebengebirge is home to less than 24 hectares of vines on uplifted volcanic hills. Riesling is about 70% of the plantings in Loreley. South-facing slopes are more difficult to come by, as you can imagine, than they are in the Mosel, but you do get a few sites that are important at Bacharach Hahn, and your Devonian slate continues through this area too. The Heiske Bergstrasse, perhaps less super quality focused, only a couple of Bereich and only a handful of vineyard sites are probably super important. It's the smallest Anbaugebiet, both by size and by hectares under vine. I'll show it to you here. It's this little guy right here. Cool. Although it has a great growing season for viticulture, it's extra long. The soils here are weathered granite, porphyry, and sandstone. It's about half Riesling. There's some Spätburgunder, Grauburgunder, and Müller-Thurgau. It was once considered a satellite of the Rheingau and tended by the closer Eberbach, and still some other vineyard sites are there, although the wines pretty rarely leave the local area. And that leaves us with, well, the redheaded stepchildren, right? The Salionsstrut and the Sachsen. Phylloxera wiped these bad boys out until about the 1950s. They're the northernmost wine-growing regions by parallel. Co-ops really helped maintain the areas during communism. Although today there is one really great quality producer, Schloss Proschwitz in the Sachsen. It's their largest estate and their first VDP member. That's my presentation on the remainder of Germany. I know it's not super long, but I think it helps to break these out from the Mosel and the Rheingau to help you understand the importance of those two regions and what's going on in these other regions here too. We'll just take a quick look at the map before we exit, but important to remember, I think, Pinot Noir is king in the Ahr. You see more Spätburgunder in the Baden, more red wines in the Württemberg. The Pfalz, Nahe, and Rheinhessen are still great quality Rieslings. Don't forget about the Rotterhang, right? The Bath towns in the Nahe, and the extension of Alsace in the Pfalz. And that's really all there is to know about Germany. So I hope you enjoy it. Happy Mother's Day. Thanks for spending some some time today with a person that's not your mother, but now go hang out with your mother and enjoy it. And we'll see you all next week. Cheers.